I don't know about you, but I'm excited to see some of the mask mandates beginning to relax. Amen? No, we need a bigger whoop whoop for that. Amen. That's right. Yeah, I'm excited. So hopefully it means this COVID mess is starting to come to even further end, and we can begin to continue to connect and build relationships with each other and not be masked up. So now you know what that means. It means you might need a breath mint. That's what it means. You can't hide behind the mask anymore. So we are in a series that we've been doing called Next Level Love. And what we're looking at in this series is we're looking at how to be able to connect with one another in a meaningful way. And so there's a guy named Jeff Van Epp. He wrote a book called How to Avoid Falling in Love with Jerks, which is just great. I mean, I just love the title alone. And that's for people that are dating or want to go into dating. And then for those that are married, he wrote a book called Building Better Together. Now, for both books, he used the same model. It's called the relationship attachment model. You'll see it pop up on the screen right next to me. But with the relationship attachment model, you see that it follows a progression. And so the first aspect of that progression is know, that you really get to know someone. And then the next aspect is trust. And then we get to rely. And then as a result of that, we get to commit. And then finally, we get to touch. So it's know, rely, know, trust, rely, commit, and trust, or touch. I'm going to get it right eventually. But again, that should pop up on the screen. But with that, here's the thing. The whole idea behind this is there is a natural relationship progression that happens in our connection with others. It just is. And so the mistake happens when our relationships and our connection in our relationships are no longer following this method or following this passage or following this way. That really is the greatest challenge of them all, is when we find that happen. And so what happens, for example, is when we begin to trust someone before we know them, that creates a problem. Or when we rely on someone before we are able to trust in them, that creates a problem. We talked about this whole idea of touch. And when you find yourself sexually involved with someone before you know someone, again, that opens the door for that to be a problem as well. So as we look at this, that's the commitment that we really want to find ourselves into making, is to look at and making sure that we are following the right path for that type of connection. So with that in mind, I found some quotes that I thought were really great that talked about this connection and this relationship with others and how sometimes relationships can be a problem. So here's the first quote that I thought was great. It says, "I hate when couples have a little fight and then they change their Facebook status to single. I don't get into a fight with my parents and change my status to orphan." I thought that was really funny. How about this one? When your ex says, "You will never find anyone like me," you reply with, "That's the point." That's exactly the point. Or how about this one? I love this one. If your relationship has more issues than a magazine, I suggest you cancel the subscription. I like that one as well. So with that in mind, again, we have been going through, like I said before, this progression when it comes to our relationships. And so week one, we looked at this idea of knowing someone, to make a commitment to know and be known. That's the challenge for that. So we looked at that. And then week two, we looked at trust. And we just talked about how important trust is in building our relationships with one another as well. So to know and to trust. And so here's what we said is we want to make sure that we give ourselves the right time to be able to know someone before we move to the point of being able to trust them. Now, I really want to encourage you to do this. If you have not been here for the last 2 weeks, I want to encourage you to go back and watch the live streams. Also, if you've missed the last 2 weeks of the podcast, because again, what happens is our messages and the podcast, they work together to create a complete thought for the week. So I would encourage you, go back, watch the live stream. And we've also done it now to where if you go to our website, you don't have to watch the entire service. You can just watch the message alone. and have that, as a process. Or if you watch on YouTube, there's timestamps that are on the bottom, so you can go right to the message or go right to the music or wherever it is that you want to be. Or if you just love the announcements, you can click that. You can go to that as well. So those timestamps are there, and they're available for you too. So we talked about know, and we talked about trust. This week, we want to make the commitment to talk about rely. What does it mean to rely on someone? Now, I don't know about you, but as I was working on this, I thought about, what is the difference between trust and rely? Because it feels like they should go hand in hand, right? It feels like they're kind of the same thing. So I wanted to explain the difference between those two real quickly to you. The first one is this idea of trust. Trust is all about character. And so what you're looking for is, do they have the kind of character that you can trust? That's why it's so important for you to not rush into a relationship. It's to give yourself time to be able to see who they are, what they are, so that you can actually begin to know their character. And so with that, once you begin to know their character, now you're at a point where you can begin to rely on them. So it is possible to trust someone and not rely on someone until you see who they really are. And then what you do is, once you see that the character is trustworthy, now you can begin to rely on them to encourage you, to support you in your life. This is so important for us to do. But I'll tell you, this is probably one of the most difficult things for us to do in our society, because we do live in an individualistic culture. We really do. I mean, just think about some of the things that we say. I'm gonna say some sayings, and then I want to see if you can complete them. Ready? Here's the first one. If it's going to be, it's up to me. That's right. If it's going to be, it's up to me. Or how about this one? If I don't take care of number one, no one else will. If I don't look out for number one, no one else will. Or how about one of the greatest songs of all time, the greatest love of all, right? And there's that line, learning to love yourself. That's right. Learning to love yourself is the greatest love of all. Learning to love yourself is the greatest love of all. Now, I want to make this really clear. I'm not saying that we shouldn't love ourselves, but I'm just saying it's very easy for us to only focus on ourselves. It's very easy for us to do that. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Let's say that you're on Zoom. And I'm sure how many of us, we've all been on Zoom, right? We've all been there. Okay, so let's say that you're on Zoom, and there's a bunch of faces that are on the screen. Whose face do you look at most? Let's be real. Let's be real. I'll be honest, it's me. I'm making myself, because I don't want to be dorky on Zoom. So I'm looking like, oh my gosh, what is that? What am I doing? Or how about this? When you do a groupie, which is basically a group selfie, when you do a groupie and you look at the picture, who's the first picture that you look at? Yours. And how many of you have done this? You look at that groupie, and everybody else looks good, but you don't. What do? Let's take this picture again. Right? We got to take this again because I don't look good. So you will make the whole group take the picture again, and if somebody else looks terrible, well, they should have had their eyes open. Not my problem. I look good now. It's that kind of thing. So it is very easy for us to be people who focus in on ourselves. And sometimes, if you've been in a situation where you've had or experienced pain in your life, when it comes to this aspect of relying, I've seen people have two responses. The first one is that we become too dependent, right? Because of hurt, we begin to just rely on people, over-rely, and maybe we over-rely, and we begin to trust them way too soon with too much, and rely on them way too soon, way too much, because we just want to be connected in a relationship. So we can become too dependent. Or, if we've been hurt in a relationship, we can become too independent. Too independent. So we begin to look at that as far as the whole idea of this independence, like, I don't trust no one, I'm not going to rely on, I'm going to take care of myself, because I can't trust anyone to take care of me. Those are two responses that we can have when it comes to relying on others. Both are extreme, both are unhealthy. Both are extreme, both are unhealthy. So it's vital that we make a commitment to be able to look at both. Why? Because here's the truth, is many of us find ourselves in a position where it's hard for us to rely or depend on others. And sometimes the natural response to that is we try to go through life alone. But it says this in Genesis chapter 2, verse 18. It says, "Then the Lord God said, 'It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper that is suitable for him, or a helper just right for him.'" So that tells us. Like when you go through and you look at creation, it's like good, light, good, earth, good, sea, good, animals, good, man, good, alone, not good. So what does he do? He creates someone for him. We are not designed to be alone. And then it says this in Romans chapter 12, verses 4 through 5. "Just as our bodies have many parts and each part has a special function, so it is with Christ's body. We are many parts of one body, and we all belong to each other." We all belong to each other. So as we look at this, we all are different parts. We all bring different elements. We all bring different values. Now, for many of you that follow us on Instagram, you saw me post a story this week, and that was, what does this tell us about the meaning of life? What does this tell us about purpose? So I went to Coffee Bean this morning, and I know I'm a traitor to my family because my daughter works at Starbucks, but I was in a hurry. Since I don't look at me. So I went to Coffee Bean this morning, and I grabbed my favorite chai tea latte. Now, if you notice, it's in a what? Cup. And the cup is designed to hold stuff. That's what the cup is designed for. But then, not only that, they put something on the cup. What did they put on the cup? The lid, right? And the lid comes in handy. Why? Because if you accidentally spill your cup, this is an expensive latte. So hopefully it only spills a little bit out of the drinking spout part. But that's also the thing that's really nice as well, is you have that little drinking spout part on the top. So that way you're able to just have that and just a little bit come out at a time as much as you want. But then, not only that, they created one of the greatest inventions known to mankind is this little plug here. Let me tell you, this little plug has saved some messes in my car. So the whole idea of the plug is, of course, it stops it. So if you do have a spill, it doesn't come out because it's plugged in or it's plugged up. The other thing that I think is really cool is they invented this little thing right here, this little sleeve. And what is this sleeve designed for? What is it designed for? Protect your hand. Why? Because if it's too hot, and let me tell you, when they make this chai tea latte, they are not playing with the heat. So this little thing here helps to protect your hand. So the idea is all of this together, it all has different designs, it all has different purposes, but it all works together for the completion of that incredible coffee or tea experience. So now if we take that and we relate that to the wait, 1 second. So good. Love that chai tea latte. Sorry. So as we look at that, we begin to think about that. Think about church. Every single one of us has gifts, talents, and abilities. As a matter of fact, here's our main thought for today, and that is the true power of relationships is that we will never reach our full potential as well as our greatest impact alone. That's the true power of relationships. We will never reach our full potential and greatest impact alone. We need one another. Now, the best place to see this is church. Church is designed to be the place where we learn how to rely on others and begin to utilize our gifts and talents to be able to meet one another's needs. See, here's what happens, is when the church is working right, then there are 3 things that you learn. The first thing that you learn is you have something that someone else needs. You do. The second thing that you learn is someone else has something that you need. And then the third thing that you learn is reliance is when we step in and we are able to meet the needs of one another. That's reliance, is when we are able to step in and meet the needs of one another. So I just imagine what church would be like if this really works well. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I've been meeting with a health coach, and the health coach has got me thinking about a lot of things. And in meeting with the health coach, I've begun to make the connection that my health does affect my relationship with God. If I'm tired, it does affect my relationship with God. If I'm worn out because I'm eating too much sugar, it does affect my relationship with God. Like I can just go through, my weight does affect my relationship with God. It affects my commitment to Him. If I have high blood, we can look at all of those elements, those all connections. It does affect. So many times when it comes to church, the only thing that we look at that affects someone's relationship with God is the spiritual aspect. But what if, as a church, we made a commitment to minister to not just the spiritual aspect of people? What if we made a commitment to minister holistically to people? So what would that look like? For Encounter, that might mean that, hey, I noticed that finances is one of the things that keep people from coming to know God and developing their relationship with Him. So here's what I'm willing to do. I'm willing to do a finance class for our community to help them learn how to manage their finances. And then maybe once that class is done, we'll do a small group together and continue to help and invest. And that way that they can grow and begin to recognize their finances and their connection with God and begin to come to know Him. Maybe you recognize that there's someone who struggles in their relationships. And because of the things that you've learned about your relationship, maybe you want to teach a marriage class. Maybe you want to teach a parenting class. You look at those things and you say, I want to come and I want to help people with the gifts that I've learned. Maybe you begin to recognize, like, wow, nutrition really is important. I've seen the difference that it has made in my life. So I want to help others. I've learned nutrition. I want to help others. And so maybe what you do is you begin to teach nutrition classes here in Encounter, and you connect nutrition with people coming to know God. And speaking of that, maybe exercise. Maybe you've learned the benefits of yoga and relaxing and stretching in the way that it helps you. Or maybe you've learned other classes and you realize strengthening and how that helps you and how that connects you, how it burns off the extra crazy endorphins that you have, and it burns out all the toxic aspects of your life so that now you can be able to focus on God and who He is, and you want to help others to be able to do that. So you know what this does is this opens people to be able to see God in incredible ways and how He connect with God through their challenges. And now I'm using my gifts and abilities. You may not have never thought like, wow, I never thought teaching exercise classes will help someone come to know God. But it may. I had a conversation with someone this morning, and I was just thinking about what if in the future, as a church, we know that there are people in this community that are native Spanish speakers who would love to be able to learn English. So what if we taught free ESL classes here for people to come to know and get to know one another, and maybe through that they get to know God, and maybe they come to church on Sunday morning. It's a chance for them to practice their English. But it could be a great way for us, again, as a body, to minister to everyone. And that's where you see the beauty of this aspect of reliance. Church really is. It's designed to be the place where we learn how to rely on others, and we also learn how to allow others to rely on us, and as we utilize our gifts, our talents, and our abilities. Why? Because the true nature of relationships, the true power of relationships is we never reach our full potential and greatest impact alone. We never do. Or you may be saying, Ken, all that church stuff is great. I just want to learn how to make friends. I just want to learn how to have good relationships. So we've talked about this idea of trust, and I want to dig some more into this aspect of rely. And there is this one point where Jesus Christ begins to minister in a way that He communicates like, hey, I'm really in need here. I'm really struggling here. And in this example, what we do is we're actually able to see how this aspect of relying on others is so important that we see Jesus did it, and we get some great lessons on what it means to rely on others as well. So in Matthew chapter 26, verses 36 through 38, it says, then Jesus went with them to the olive grove called Gethsemane. And He said, sit here while I go over there to pray. He took Peter and Zebedee's two sons, James and John, and He became anguished and distressed. He told them, my soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. My soul is grieved to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. So basically, here's what happens. Is Jesus is with the other 11 disciples. Now, you may think, well, Kim, there's 12. But at this point, Judas is already gone, and he's doing his betrayal thing. So now he's just with the 11. So now they're walking out to this place. They get to the Garden of Gethsemane, and he says to 8 of the 11, hey, why don't you guys just stay here? And then it says he takes 3 of them with him, Peter, James, and John. So I think Jesus took them because those were the ones he had a closer relationship with. And then once he got them to that place where he was ready to pray, he said, look, hey guys, I'm anguished. I'm struggling. I'm wrestling here. I need you to watch and I need you to pray with me. So here's what we learn from that, is we learn only rely on someone at the capacity that your trust can handle. Only rely on someone at the capacity that your trust can handle. So maybe for the other 8, they weren't as connected with Jesus as the first 3 were. And so he said, hey, why don't you guys wait here? And with you guys, I know you well enough that I really want to share what's going on. I'm really wrestling. I'm really struggling. So as we look at this, it gives us some insight. So you have to be careful on that whole idea of relying on others. And I would also encourage you with this. Only rely on someone, if you're starting, like you see that their trust level is there, like I feel like their character is there, I feel like I can rely on them. I would say when you first start, only rely on someone for something that is not detrimental if they drop the ball. So start small and rely on them on aspects that your trust level can handle. And if they drop the ball, we'll talk about how to handle that in a minute. Because Jesus goes off and he prays. And then he comes back, and it says in Matthew chapter 26, verse 40, then he returned to the disciples and found them asleep. He said to Peter, couldn't you watch with me even 1 hour? So he comes back, and the disciples are zonked out. And he's like, dude, I told you I was anguishing. I'm struggling here. Could you even watch for 1 hour? And notice, he doesn't talk to all 3. He specifically talks to who? Peter. So maybe there was an aspect where he felt like maybe Peter was closer to him and that he could rely on Peter that much more in this moment. It doesn't really go into why Peter was the only one that he acknowledged, because all 3 of them were there. But here's what we do learn, is when we rely on someone and they drop the ball, approach it. Deal with it. Deal with it. Talk about where they dropped the ball at. Begin to address it. Make sure that it's something that you discuss, that you talk about. It really is key. I think a lot of times, I've done this, and I don't know if you've done this, but I've made excuses for other people on behalf of them for them dropping the ball. How many of you done that? I've done that. Oh, you know what? They're so busy. They have a lot going on. And that may be true. That may be true. But it's important for you to at least say, hey, here's what happened, and I was relying on you for this, and it didn't work out. So let's talk about what's going on. And then from there, based on their response, you can decide, do you want to rely on them again, or is it best for you to give them some time before you do so? But address it. Deal with it. So then Jesus goes off, and he prays again. And then he comes back, and it says in verse 45, then he came to the disciples and said, go ahead and sleep. In other words, oh well, have your rest. But look, the time has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. And so he realizes, like, all right, so maybe I just can't rely on you at this point, so you guys just go ahead and rest. And so maybe that's what happens, is you try this element, you try to rely on someone at a capacity that your trust can handle, and they just drop the ball, and they drop the ball again. So maybe at that point, you might say, hey, I'm just going to turn the rely-ometer off, and I'm not going to take the next step, which is commitment, and I'm not going to take the next step, which is trust, because I just can't rely on you at this point. So what that could do is save you a lot of pain in your relationships and your friendships and maybe your business partnerships as well. Save you a lot of pain, because you've now learned that you cannot rely on them, and that's okay. And that's okay. but it's good. You know what comes to mind is I think about, honestly, Judge Judy. How many of you, because it's Heidi's favorite show, so we always watch it together. And there's always at least several episodes where someone says, I'll give you an example. Hey, I took my child, I'm suing this person because I took my child to them for their child care, and they put my child in a dangerous situation, and I want my money back. That's the lawsuit. So Judge Judy begins to talk to them and begin to ask questions, and then let's say that happens on Wednesday, and then Friday, they take their child back to that child care. And then what does Judge Judy say? She said, oh, I'm not giving you any money. If it was that bad, why would you take your child back? It obviously wasn't that bad. And so it's kind of that same way. Once you see someone and they burn you on relying on them, be very careful on putting yourself in a position to where you rely on them in the future. So with that in mind, I think, again, the true power of relationships is, again, we never reach our full potential and greatest impact alone. So as we think about that, here's one of the key elements, is not only do you want to be around people who are reliable, you also want to make sure that you have learned to be reliable, that people can rely on you. Again, it says in Philippians chapter 2, verses 4 and 5, which is our theme verse for this series, and that is, don't look out only for your own interest, but take an interest in others too. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. So as we look at this, this really teaches us, we want to make sure that we reach a point that we are reliable, that we are reliable. So that's why I want to encourage you, don't make coming to Encounter just a Sunday morning experience. Now, here's what's going on is I'm finishing up the next, I'm filming now, and I'm going to finish up the next level of videos, and we're launching those onto our next step videos. We're launching those on our website. Once we're done with that, we're going to eventually launch what we're calling the growth track. And what that is for is that's for those of you that are beginning to connect with God in your relationship with him and see that begin to grow and see that begin to develop as well. Sorry, I guess I should make sure my own ringer's turned off. To see that grow and begin to develop as well. And hopefully by the time the growth track is done, you would have learned your purpose. Who's calling me at this point, too? You know I'm preaching. Kids kind of got something happening on Sunday mornings. Call me later. All right, sorry. But I should have had my ringer off. But with that in mind, we know that when it comes to this idea of just being able to be someone who is reliable, that we make a commitment to allow ourselves to be present in that way, investing in others, and allowing God to be able to use our life to be able to do so. And I'll tell you, I'll be flat out honest with you. I wish that I could say that I have the corner market on reliability. I wish that I could say, but I don't. We had our family devotional last night, and I'll tell you, this message really convicted me because this really is an area of my life that I struggle. I have the best intentions. It's really great. But how many of us realize intentions don't write checks? Right? I have the best intentions. And I will tell you that a majority of our marriage, I was unreliable. Like Heidi really could not depend on me. And she really carried the weight of our family. Now, when it was just the two of us, the weight wasn't so bad. And then when we had our first two kids, the weight, it grew, but it wasn't so bad. And then we adopted two kids from Ethiopia. So then it grew. And then they grew. And then the weight grew. And then one day, for some reason, I was able to see how much weight that Heidi was carrying. And I've grown. I will still say, I'm being honest, I struggle with laziness. One of my things, too, is when life gets overwhelming, I check out. Like, mentally, I'm gone. So I'm working on changing that, too. But it is an area where I definitely have and will continue to work on and becoming more reliable. But I want to encourage us all to make a commitment to begin to develop reliability in our lives. There's a quote in How to Avoid Falling in Love with Jerks that he says I thought was great. He says, a focus on the other person rather than focusing solely on oneself would have led to a greater sense of self-fulfillment. there's something about being able to serve others. So I want to give you a really cool test point. Listen to this. If you're interested in dating someone, being friends with someone, or entering a business partnership with someone, what is one of the tests that you can do to know if they're reliable? And it's really simple. Do they serve? Do they serve others? Do they have a heart for others? Because if you see service in their life, you see volunteering in their life, you see investment in their life, you see them making a difference in the lives of others, then odds are they're probably more reliable than not, and you can begin to depend on them. That's what we want to develop in our lives as well, is develop that reliability by how? Beginning to serve. People who serve have developed a heart for other people. People who serve have developed the ability to be able to look beyond themselves to be able to see the needs of others. So look at how they serve. And if they don't serve, but they love to be served, that's a red flag maybe. Also, you can't rely on selfish people. You can't rely on selfish people. So that's one of the signs that shows that they're not. Here's the other thing, and we talked about this on our podcast this week, and I just wanted to hit this again because I think that this is so important for those that haven't listened to the podcast. I think this is something that maybe you need to hear. And that when it comes to trust and rely, one of the reasons why our relationships can fall apart is because we are trusting and relying on someone to meet a need that only God can meet. And so that's putting pressure on a friendship, on a relationship, on a business partnership, because here's the truth, no human being can fully meet your deepest soul's needs. None can. None can. And the illustration that I gave in the podcast this week is I said that they can maybe bring you companionship, which is great, but they cannot make you feel loved. They can't. They can remove all the conflict out of your life, but they cannot make you feel peace. They can maybe have the tools to buy the house, but they cannot make you feel home. They can provide everything financially, where you're doing really well financially, where you have all of the riches, but they cannot make you feel wealth. As far as that is important for us to look at, and we're going to dig into this a little bit more on our podcast this week, as well as we're going to dig into this aspect of being able to see how people serve and how that makes a difference in their lives. We're going to dig into that in the podcast this week as well. But I just want to encourage you to begin to ask yourself that. Am I struggling in my relationships? Let me go back and look at my relationships in the past. And did they fall apart because I was relying on them to do something that humanly they're just not capable of being able to do? I'm asking them to love me, say that you love me. Like, I'm asking them to do that, right? I'm asking them to be there and be that person and be there for me. And the truth is, they don't have the capacity. Maybe they have moments. Maybe they have moments where they make you feel loved and you feel connected. Maybe they do something really sweet and you feel loved and you feel connected. But then when they come home and they're worn out for work and they don't even want to look at you, all they want to do is boop, boop, boop. You don't feel loved in that moment. Because there is a limit to their capacity to be able to love you. So make sure that as you begin to move that meter of reliance, make sure that you're constantly checking in with yourself to ask yourself, am I relying on him or her or this friend or my business partner? Am I relying on them to meet a need that ultimately only God can meet? Because if you do, you're setting your relationship up for failure, your friendship up for failure, that business partnership up for failure. So ask yourself, where do you stand at in your relationship with him? Where have you allowed God to fully be able to meet your needs and be there for you? What are you lacking in your life that ultimately only God can really do? Really dig into that. Really dig into that. Especially if you're single. If you're single, this is a great time to do that. So that way when you begin to meet that guy or you meet that girl, you've gone through this process to make sure that you're whole. I wish, like I see my kids here, I wish I had known that when I was their age. it would have kept me from making some really stupid decisions that I made in trying to connect and have relationships with others. It would have protected me if I knew I needed to be grounded in my relationship with him. So I want to encourage you with that this morning. Father, I thank you because of your heart. I thank you because of your presence, that you constantly make yourself